Good morning, everybody. Yes, it's Wednesday. Oh, you survived the Ides of March yesterday, which is very good news. And I got all the ladies with me this morning. I've got Lebang, I've got Leigh-Ann, and I've got Simpiwe in the studio in Johannesburg. Yes, very exciting. And also, I will be in Mexico from tomorrow. So this is my last show for a couple of days. But I'm only missing, I think it's 7 shows altogether. So that's not even going to be, it's hardly any time at all, right? I mean, 7 days goes by like that, if you think about it. That's just 1 week, effectively. So,
I mean, for those of us who don't know, can you give a quick summary of Mexico? First time I'm hearing of it.
Oh, you've never heard of, I've never said anything to you before? You see, this is why I'd be a terrible husband. Honey, I'm going on a business trip. I'll be back in June.
Yeah, I'm going tomorrow.
Sorry about that. I'm going to a wedding in Cancun in Mexico.
Wow.
Bloody amazing. Yeah. It's been planned since last year already. So it shouldn't be a surprise. Sorry that you're only finding out now, Leigh-Ann.
Do you have to pay yourself to go to this wedding?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very nice though. I mean, it's going to be really, really cool. The people whose wedding it is in that family, it's actually I think it's the 3rd wedding in that family alone, or the 4th even, that I'm going to. Just really awesome people. I know them. They live in New York now, and yeah, this is I think it's either the 3rd or the 4th wedding that I'm going to. It's going to be really fun. I don't know how many people are going to be there, but they've booked out the resort that we're staying at. It's unbelievable.
Goodness. That's amazing.
Yeah. No, it's superb. How are things
for you, Gareth?
Lebang, your sound is a bit soft for me this morning. I can hardly hear you, and I'm not used to you being all like timid and soft. It doesn't fit with you. Yeah. No, we need to get that right. So just pump up your levels there if you can. I've got you about as hot as you can get on mine. Anyway, the team will be looking after you while I'm away for those 7 days. So I'm sure that you have a whole smorgasbord, a menu of really cool stuff lined up for you over the next few days.
Testing.
Oh, that's better.
How's that?
That's more like you. Yeah, there we go.
Is that my radio voice?
It is. It sounds good. Okay, so where do we begin on this Wednesday? There's quite a lot to talk about. First of all, Lebang already asked me yesterday. I must bring her something from Mexico. So, the only people who've like jumped in before I'd even offered to bring anybody a present are my sister-in-law, who's like, "Oh, you got to buy me one of these things. And it's got to be multicolored, and it's got to have tassels on it, and it's got to be." I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna write that down," because she's got a very specific. Like, she's also the kind of person who tells you, she's almost like a gift registry for her birthday, like Simpiwe, where you know what you have to get. Everybody else, I'm allowed to use my imagination and find them whatever cool thing pops up. But someone like her or Lebang, it's like, no, wait, we've got a list for you. And since it's Simpiwe's birthday at the end of this month, she may be the only one who gets a present. But go ahead, Lebang, tell everybody what you want. This is ridiculous.
Honestly, my request is so simple. If anything, I'm looking out for you, Gareth, because I'm making your life easier. You don't need to walk into a shop. You don't need to swipe. You're not paying anything for it. You just need an empty 2-liter bottle, and you take a walk to the ocean, and you just fill up that bottle with some ocean water. Get a little bit of sand at the bottom if you can. For aesthetics. Just for aesthetics, close that bad boy up and bring that baby home. That's all.
What are you going to do with it?
So I'm going to put it on my front lawn. It's going to sit in the garden and just like look pretty. That's just what I'm going to do with it. Apparently it's good luck. Apparently it chases away spirits. I grew up seeing my gran do this all the time. She'd go to KZN, she'd go to the beach in Durban and just collect all these bottles of like beach water. I never knew why until I actually asked. And she's like, it's just really, really good luck. I was like, okay.
I've heard that some people use it to purge. So they'll drink the water and then they'll they'll purge afterwards. That's what our domestic worker used to do. We used to purge.
Same for me.
Process.
Okay, well, to each their own. I just
You're
want
not-
some of that Mexico beach sand, some of that Mexico water on my lawn.
Is one allowed to take away something like that? I mean, will you get through the airports?
I don't know if you'll get through. I don't know if you'll get through, with customs and all the rest. They'll be like, "What is this in your bag, mister?" And it's not so much the Mexicans. Like, I don't think they care, because the Mexicans don't care if you bring COVID in or out. They're like totally
In
disinterested.
or out, they don't care.
They don't give a shit. No, they really don't care. I mean, you could take like a cup full of pure COVID into Mexico, and they'll be like, nice to see you. Come into this country, no problem." Anyway, so that'll be interesting. But it's the Americans on the way back, because I think there's a brief stop in Miami, so they'll probably go, "Excuse me, sir, what is this here in this bottle?" So I certainly wouldn't take it as hand luggage. They'll definitely confiscate that. But if I put it into I'll see. Listen, Lebang, if I can get away with it, I'll do it.
Maybe
But,
put it in
You
Reader's
know
bag.
what? You
yeah,
could probably use some sort of empty tequila vessel, tequila bottle, and
Yeah.
put it in there. That would be absolutely acceptable.
they wouldn't think much of that, would they?
No.
I don't know. I'm always so nervous because customs in certain countries are very uptight, and others they don't give a damn.
And
So
jails in certain countries are pretty bad.
Yeah, let's not go there, shall we? Okay, so yesterday I had to do a proper PCR COVID test, right? So
Yeah.
did it in the morning, at about it was probably about 10, and then I was so nervous because they meant to have the results back to you in 12 hours, and if you don't have that clear COVID test, you can't fly. So that means you forfeit the price of your tickets and everything else. And it would have been an absolute disaster. And this is probably the thing that makes me the most nervous about flying at the moment, even though, mostly it's opened up. Unless, of course, and we'll talk about this in a moment, unless, of course, you booked on Comair, on Kulula, or on BA, and you were trying to come back from Cape Town. That would have been a disaster. We'll talk about that just now, because that is an absolute mess. But eventually at 9:00 last night, I got my results back from the lab, and they were like, "You are COVID negative and you're okay to travel." And I cannot tell you how much of a relief it was, because I don't care about it. I really don't. I could be carrying every strain of COVID, and I wouldn't even worry. I'm not scared of getting sick of it or anything from it. Or
it just
anything,
messes up your plans.
It just messes up the plan. So I was like over it. And then to compound that, yesterday, I was holding thumbs that our stupid government would decide to abandon their idea of the state of disaster, because there is no conceivable reason that we still need a state of disaster in this country. Every other country in the world's thrown away the masks. I think we are one of maybe 5 countries that are left that are still doing the masks, the sanitizer, the vaccines, the tests, all that kind of crap. We're one of the few left. And I can't help thinking that it's just because some people are making money, because we know how. We've already discovered how. We've found all the evidence, and now these people are supposedly going to be prosecuted for all these people who were in on the PPE tenders.
Yeah.
In March of 2020, there were all these people who were on the take, all these people with their hands in the till, some of them in the presidency, some of them the health minister himself was on the take there. And you think, well, this is what these fuckers are doing. They're actually just stealing more, so they need another month to steal. That's essentially what they're doing. Well, that's all I can think, and I know it's a cynical point of view, but I don't see any other explanation. Do you?
No, it's true, and there's always a sneaky reason behind these things. Where do we live with absolute honesty and clarity? No. And we don't.
It drives me crazy. Really, it's not good. I just also heard the story about a woman who got back from Kenya, and they didn't test her in Kenya, and she got back here to South Africa, and then at OR Tambo they actually put her in a holding cell for the night because they didn't have anyone there to test her.
Hey, boy.
Yeah.
So whose fault is that?
Well, that's because of the state of disaster. Because of that rule, they can do that to you. It's essentially suspending your rights for, 12 hours or whatever. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. There's no medical reason why someone with a test or without a test, because we know these tests are bullshit anyway, why they should lock you up. I mean, I would be ready to sue the pants off of government if they did that to me. But of course, that would drag on for 3 years, and they'd probably end up bankrupting me because, who has more money and deeper pockets than government in this country? But nonetheless, it's a show of how wrong, because we all think the state of disaster is just the stupid thing that's there, but actually it has consequences. And this bothers me. So, Malusi says, Granny lied, Lebang. That bottle of water was just to stop dogs from shitting on your grass. We used to, yes, that works, right, Leigh-Ann? If you put a bottle of water on the carpet.
I've seen that. However, what's confusing me now is in my old house, my gardener, because he had his own garden, he would put bottles lying on their sides, but no animals had access to his grass. So sometimes I've heard that it's a sun thing to attract the sun to the lawn, but then you're leaving these burn patches under the bottles. So I'm not quite sure.
Well, if you know what, mine not to reason why. If Lebang wants it, then maybe I'll make it happen for her. That's the least I can do is try, right, Lebang?
100%. And really, I'll appreciate it, man. I think I just want to be able to point at that bottle and say, you see that one? See that pretty one over there? That one's for me. Go. That's not just any water, baby. That's me. Go.
I mean, most people say, bring me a little bottle of tequila or something, even if it's one of those small sample size ones, because then at least I have some actual Mexican tequila, but not you. You just want some seawater.
Yeah, let's see some of that seawater, baby.
Well, Dave says, my girlfriend just flew to Dublin via Amsterdam from Johannesburg without a single test or vaccine. And you see, because it's all just a show. It's all a show. And I hate to be the one to say I told you so, but I told you so. I knew in March last year, in March 2 years ago, this was bullshit, and it's turned out all to be bullshit. In fact, those PCR tests that they make everybody have, just nonsense. More false positives have been churned out than actual results. Proves nothing. Nobody trusts them. Completely stupid. But of course, someone's making money somewhere. So let's see what happens.
Well, China's not helping in any way, because it seems like they're just back to square one.
Yeah. Well, they haven't had enough of. And by the way, did I ever say China must pay? Because I'm sure I said that at some point too. And I'm still saying China must pay for what they've done to the world. Now it looks like they're all locking down again. So here we go, everybody. All right. My BFF lives in Mexico. She recently visited those pyramids that you mentioned yesterday. Epic enjoy, says Dr. Robin. Yeah, I'm hopefully going to go and see the pyramids of Chichen Itza on the Yucatan Peninsula, but I'll let you know. I'll take pictures and so on. Carl says, Gareth, have you ever had anal sex before? That seawater is going to land you in jail. Don't do it, man. See,
Carl.
What if your stupid present ends up getting me into jail? How would you feel about that, Lebang?
I wouldn't really feel guilty. I mean, there's far worse that'll land you in jail than just my stupid seawater.
How about I don't want to go to jail, Lebang? How about that's not somewhere I'm planning on ending up?
That's not on your list of interests, no?
Oh my God.
Oh.
I mean, you'd have a good story to tell.
I'd rather
come
not
up with content.
I'll find better stories. I promise. I'll work extra hard.
Gareth, we've watched enough Breaking Bad. We need to know now how real it is down there. Give us the real source, the real juice, man. Come back with something good, Doug.
No. See, Ruth says here, my 3-year-old had to get a PCR test. They made his nose bleed, and he got a false positive. You see?
No.
Yeah, you see, it's insanity. We're being ruled over by morons, the dumbest people in the world, not just here in South Africa, because we've always known our government was stupid, and they keep proving it to us day after day. But every other government's just as stupid, because they also do this nonsense. Also want you to do tests that prove nothing. Also want you to get certificates that prove nothing. Also want you to go through. When did 9/11 happen? It's years ago now. It's more than 20 years since that happened or something, right? How long is it? 2001. It's 20 years.
Yeah, 20.
So don't tell me that we still need to be scanning people's shoes and fucking taking off belts at the airport. It's ridiculous. Sure,
it's just that power thing, man. It's just a power thing, and it trickles down right to the bottom. I was walking into a store yesterday, and there was this very, very old, tired man. You could see that this guy was just tired, and the security guards had stopped him because he didn't have a mask. They're like, "No, you can't get in. You don't have a mask. You need to buy one." He's like, "Well, I don't have money to buy another mask. I'm sorry." They were like, "Yeah, well, you're not getting in." It was just like a power thing, and I was just so sad for him. And I was like, "Oh, when is this gonna end?" It's just bull.
But don't again, like we said yesterday. Remember, we agreed on this, Lebang. We don't get to tell other people what to do. So don't tell
Fair.
people to wear a mask. If you don't want to go into a shop because there's no one wearing a mask in the shop, then you go somewhere else, or you wait until the shop's empty. Tell everyone else. The mask does nothing. It's theater, okay? It's theater. We figured
Smokes
that
and
out.
mirrors.
Ugh. Anyway, moving on, because I'm not going to have any of these conversations. When I get back, COVID's dead. All right? Done. No more talking about it. We talk about it like history. We're like, can you remember how dumb we were? Anyway.
Now.
Yeah. Go and check out El Chapo's tunnels if you can. I think you're thinking of... Is El Chapo? He was in Mexico, right? But I think maybe you're thinking about Colombia. I'm not sure, or that was Pablo Escobar. I'm not sure. Anyway, someone said Machu Picchu earlier, but that's in Peru, not in Mexico. So, and then, yeah, Corona's Boring says Chichen Itza was the power center of the Incas under Tikal. No, that's not right. Chichen Itza was the Mayans, not the Incas. The Incas were in Peru. So you're getting your pre-Columbian American ancient civilizations wrong. Sorry, it's the
If there's
Mayans.
one person that knows like history inside out, it's Gareth. I say this as often as I can. Like,
and by the way,
try.
the Mayans are the ones who used to offer live human sacrifices to their gods.
Oh, that's nice.
They used to pull out
like in the Bible.
Yeah, they used to pull out the heart of a living person while they were still alive. They'd put them on an altar and pull out their living heart. They'd cut it out there and then while they were still alive and hold it up while it was still beating, offer it to the gods, and then cut off the person's head and roll them down the pyramid stairs. Those are the pyramids I'm going to. So there may be a little bit of, I would say, post-traumatic stress disorder in those stones over the last couple of 100 years. Plus,
a little bit of discomfort.
There is a place near where I'm going where they call it the Wall of Skulls, where they have all the skulls of a couple of thousand people probably who were sacrificed like that. Because if you had a bad season and you didn't harvest enough vegetables, then that was because you didn't kill enough innocent people. So, so that's how people used to think in the world. And let's not pretend that human civilization is this beautiful story. These are the people who used to rule Mexico. So, now they're worried about like illegal immigrants across the U.S. border, drug dealers and gangs, but that's still better than the Mayans.
Yeah.
All right. So Bakabantu says history check with Gary from Mexico. That's obviously me. And I don't speak any Spanish. This is almost where I wish I did, because my sister and her boyfriend speak Spanish. Well, they've learned Spanish on that Duolingo app. And they're pretty good. I mean, they've got a decent vocabulary and all the rest. And they're always irritatingly saying things to each other in Spanish. And I'm like, oh.
That's so cute.
No. It is kind of cute, but it's also annoying if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, Corona's Boring says 6 o'clock. Give me a break. All right. Well, we'll just ease off of the human sacrifices then. For a little bit. We'll go easy on that. Be careful to eat pork while you're there. Many stories of serious tapeworm from uncooked pork. Well, lucky for you, Ruth, I'm very Jewish, so won't be eating pork. I'm Jewish. I mean, I don't
Jewish nyana.
Anyway, dead virgins make for great corn. I'm just saying. Yeah, that's exactly what the Mayans believed. That's exactly right. I listen to this show on Spotify every day at work. First time I've been able to comment, says Andre. Well, welcome, Andre. It's always nice.
Welcome.
It's nice to have new people in the comments. I'm not saying that we don't like the people who've been commenting from the start, but the more the merrier. And I know loads and loads of people who do not listen to the show live and they are unable to comment. And if you ever want to comment on something or you think we're talking complete nonsense, or you think we're making a lot of sense and you'd like to tell us that you agree, whatever it is, you can mail us at contact@cliffcentral.com. That is the general email for just about anything, including all the regular stuff like Dr. Hanan and Collectomania. And today, the final episode of Blind History, and it's going to be a doozy. It's going to be Jesus of Nazareth. Yes, the historical Jesus in Blind History today.
The return.
We thought we'd end on a high because we had Hitler last week. So we thought we'd go to the extreme depths and then we'd go to the sublime heights.
Yeah.
And we've got an episode on Jesus this morning. So don't miss that at 7:30. Lebang and Leigh-Ann and Simpiwe and all the team are going to be looking after you while I'm away. They've got a hell of a nice lineup. We actually went through it yesterday at the office. Some cool things happening in the next few days. So lots of exciting things. All right. Leigh-Ann, you have a few things on your agenda, and I wanted to start off with this. Elon Musk, apparently, and listen, you don't have to like Elon Musk, although I don't know why anyone would have a problem with him. First of all, the guy is trying to solve energy problems. He's trying to get us into electric cars that aren't shit. He's sending rockets into space so that we can maybe one day colonize Mars. The guy doesn't seem to be doing anything that deserves hatred, but there's some people who just don't like him. If you don't like him, though, you'll probably like this. He challenged Vladimir Putin to a fistfight for the fate of the Ukraine. And if you did that or if I did that, no one would take any notice, right? But apparently the Russian government actually responded to him.
Yeah, it's crazy. He tweeted, Elon did.
Yeah.
He said, I hereby challenge Vladimir Putin to single combat.
Yeah.
Saying he wants to fight Russian strongmen for Ukraine. This fueled a major tweet storm, which were even filled with a Shakespeare reference and memes about invasion. Quote from Macbeth in there. He actually tagged the Kremlin's official English language account in his message.
Yeah.
And he's also apparently opened his Starlink internet service network to the besieged country at the request of Ukrainian officials. But yes, he said, I hereby challenge Vladimir Putin to a single combat, typing in Putin's name in Russian.
Okay.
Stakes are Ukraine, he added, writing the country's name in Ukrainian.
All right. So
he also said,
when is it going to happen, Leigh-Ann? That's all I'm interested in. Like, when do we get to watch? This is an MMA fight I would watch. I think this would be interesting.
But yes, the government did respond, saying, while you try, is this the government? I'm just trying to. Yes,
Are you translating right now in real time, Leigh-Ann?
Yes,
is that why you took so long to say that?
This is a live translation. Sorry, I've actually had to look at a different article because the other one you could view once and then you have to subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm now floundering a bit, but I will find the government's response rather. But the Ukraine stepping in as well, saying, Elon Musk, while you try to colonize Mars, Russia tried to occupy Ukraine. While your rockets successfully land from space, Russian rockets attack Ukrainian civil people. We ask you to provide Ukraine with Starlink stations and to address sane Russians to stand.
But
and
I think
he replied immediately saying, Starlink service is now active in Ukraine, more terminals en route.
Yes. I've just given that to you already. Don't ask me for shit I've already given you. It should have been his response. But I would like to see this more. You know, if world leaders, like let's say we went to war with, I don't know, Lesotho, then our president should have to get in the ring and fight hand-to-hand combat against King Letsi. That's what we need. I think we would eliminate so much pain and ugliness and war and all the shitty things. This has always been something that humans have understood. In fact, back in ancient times, very often the fate of a country was decided by either the king versus the other king, or the best soldier of this side versus the best soldier of that side. And I think that's still the way we should do it. Now, I don't know that either Elon Musk or Vlad are necessarily the best soldier on either side. I mean, Vlad is not in bad shape for a man of his age. And, you know, There are all those pictures of him riding a horse shirtless through the rivers of Siberia. And Elon Musk, I don't think he's terribly unfit, but I don't think he's the fittest of all men ever. But I would say you get the best, soldier of either side and let them fight it out. That's all we need. And it would just solve everything. Trial by combat. Loser gets completely subjugated. Winner gets to take over. Then it's done. And no one can argue. Finished.
I feel like Vlad would definitely get like a couple of punches in though.
No,
like he just seems like the type. He seems like one of those guys that he just goes once and like you're knocked out. He maybe doesn't have it like he used to, but yeah, Elon wouldn't stand a chance.
I do have the Russian government's reply.
Actual response, yeah.
Saying, "You little devil are still young. Compete with me, weakling. It would only be a waste of time."
He sounds so. I mean, if that probably is actually Vlad. He's like a dictator following. Give the following message
it's the
to little
Director General of Russia's space agency, Dmitry Rogozin.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds like something straight out of Star Wars.
Hugely.
I will fight you. I shall destroy you. That kind of thing.
Come to me. Let me show you who's in charge. Oh.
Well, Vlad does have. I mean, he's a judo black belt or something.
Yeah, nice.
He's a judo black belt. Because I saw the International Judo Association disassociated from him the other day. We're not friends with him anymore. We don't recognize him. So I mean, I'm sure he's really cut up about that because, of course, by you not acknowledging him, he loses all his judo skills. Dummies.
Suddenly forgets everything.
Exactly. Anyway, a lot of people saying, including Carl, agreeing with you, Lebang, Putin would fuck Elon and Zelensky up. It's a bad idea.
Real quick.
I mean, listen, I don't think Cyril would be very good at fighting anyone, frankly. Can you imagine? Yes, sis.
Not
Cyril,
him, not Zuma.
No, none of our leaders recently. In fact, I can't think of anyone in our cabinet who would even be any good at fighting. Can you? Is there one? There's not even one among them.
Think back to like Zulu warrior days because there's nothing since then.
Yeah, maybe when Shaka was king of the Zulu, then we had a chance if he was our representative. But otherwise, we're in big shit because we're pretty much at the bottom of the pecking order in every single way.
We really are.
If we had, I think maybe the only countries that we could fuck up, maybe Canada because Trudeau's such a little pussy. maybe Justin Trudeau, Joe Biden because he's so old.
You just flick Biden's freaking forehead and he's gone.
His brain's already short circuiting. So if you just went like that to him, like
you could just say to him, just walk down this path, and he would walk. He would say, okay, and he would fall off a cliff.
Yeah, he would. So maybe him and Trudeau. That's not so bad. I mean, then we could take over North America. But we'd need Cyril to spend at least a couple of weeks in the gym, and I don't think he even knows what that is.
Forget it.
It's 50-50. Frankly, there's even the distinct possibility that like Joe Biden could fuck Cyril Ramaphosa up. I mean, that would be embarrassing. This 900-year-old man, like, oh, come on, I got you. I'll take you on, Sonny. It would be so bad. I wonder which leader in the world. Probably Vlad is right up there, actually, now that I think about it.
Think about it,
Can you imagine Boris Johnson? Ugh.
That just sounds sweaty.
You better not fight with me. I fight really dirty. I'm not scared of you.
You have to put his hair in a ponytail or wear an Alice band like the football players.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. There's not a world. Emmanuel Macron would also be useless.
What about Jacinda Ardern?
Oh God, Jacinda. Well, look, her teeth when she opens up her mouth to smile at you at the light, then she could blind you with those fucking choppers of hers. She's like a cross. She's Sarah Jessica Parker and the horse's child. That's what she is.
Oh my!
Maybe she can kick. Cook. Sorry, maybe she can cook. Jacinda Ardern. Yeah, nobody even knows who the president or the prime minister of Australia is at the moment. They've had about 8 since 2010. So Nobody's really sure. But anyway, I mean, it's hilarious. And I do wish we could go back to a stage where instead of sacrificing other people's children, the leaders, the politicians who make these decisions would actually have to put themselves on the line. That's always been, for me, a major disconnect between the way that militaries run. If you're not going to be one of those leaders who goes onto the front lines with your soldiers, you have no right to send them to war. I've always said that was a big problem. Hey, you know what? Tracy points out Madiba was a boxer. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
In his youth, but I don't know when he was like, when he came out of that jail. You remember those dance moves? I mean, he wasn't exactly in top form. Tina Turner's calf says, I would send Floyd Shivambu. He always looks like he wants all the smoke. Yeah, but the problem with him is he's also fat and lazy, and he just talks a big game, Floyd. He's not scary. Kim Jong-un and his fade are up there as well. You reckon, Dogoza? You reckon Kim Jong-un, he's also a fat little, he wears the little platform shoes. I don't know if he'd be any good.
I just think he's just a scary individual. Like, just don't look him right in the eyes. You'll probably just perish by looking at him.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, but he'll get other people to do it. He won't do it himself.
Apparently, the Freedom Front Plus leader Patrick Lekota and Cope's Patrick Terra Lekota have black belts. Well, Terra Lekota is also fat now, but maybe in his day. I mean, listen, I like the way you guys are thinking, though. You're coming up with potentially good contenders for us. I don't mind this. Ooh. Yeah, Madiba was a boxer, says Bakabantu in inverted commas. He had one match and lost. Hey, you don't need to insult the dead this morning, Bakabantu. Let's take it easy on him. All right, we have very few people we could boast about. Let's just keep him in the reserve column if we have anybody in that reserve column. All right, it is just after 6:30. We've got a little check-in with Revix scheduled on the way, but let me give you a couple of headlines. You can just tell people that you know what's going on. Trevor Noah tore into Kim Kardashian because she called poor people lazy. Trevor Noah has gone from being a funny person who was actually paid to make you laugh to being so woke and so super sublimely sensitive that now he's the defender of the poor and the defender of all people, frankly. Trevor Noah spends about 3/4 of his show now opining about things like he's been elected to public office or something. I somehow think he's forgotten what his job is, but just, don't quote me on that. Anyway, Kim Kardashian apparently put her foot in her mouth when she offered some advice during an interview. She told women that if they want to be successful and rich, they need to work hard. Is that a terrible statement?
Yeah, it doesn't.
I don't know, Kim. I don't know.
She doesn't mean that she said don't be lazy.
She worked hard on a dick in a sex video. So maybe she has some, she has some kind of room to speak here. Anyway, does that necessarily mean that she's attacking poor people? How is saying that if you want to be successful, you have to work hard?
But she was speaking specifically to women, and a couple of women actually responded to that and said, yo, Kim, I used to be your PA for 6 months without pay. Where's my money? If this is the case.
Aren't women human? I mean, it's true. It is a fact that if you work hard, you can do better than people who don't work hard. I don't see how this is a problem. Anyway, so Trevor Noah, who, now, as I said, is the conscience of the world, How often do you actually get to see things that make you laugh if you watch that daily show of his? And how often are you getting this face from him? The face where he's kind of unimpressed with something and somebody said something that he doesn't agree with, that just, sits badly with his very woke take on everything these days. He really has become one of these proselytizers. And then, he's like, you shouldn't be saying this to people, even though, many people would say he shouldn't. There's that face of like, I'm so disappointed in you. So anyway, while Trevor's doing that, here's what he said. Let me not quote him out of context like he seems to have quoted Kim. So he went on to say that poor people are not lazy and poor people work hard. He added that sometimes the poorer someone is, the harder they work. Now, there is no proof that that's true. None whatsoever. There are lots and lots of very poor people who are poor because they sit on the bones of their ass. Of course, there are poor people who do work hard. Of course there are. But that is not anybody's rule. No one's ever said, you know what? The less you work, the richer you'll become. Said no one ever. And there is absolutely not a single scrap of evidence to show that if you are poor, that means you've been working hard the whole time. Nobody is going to be able to stand on that except Trevor Noah, because he doesn't have to explain himself, you see.
So
anyway,
his mandate aside, his job aside, and what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Are we not just observing somebody who's changing naturally and, growing up from wanting to make people laugh to
listen, also there's
having
this
an opinion?
Here's his actual tweet. He says,
I actually feel that, Leigh-Ann.
He goes, it's true that Kim Kardashian works hard, but you know who else works hard? Most women. How do you know that?
Not every actor or comedian stays that way for their whole lives. They do become more serious and worry about other things.
Just on the basis of saying something that is either true or not. Trevor Noah has not got the statistics of all working women in front of him. He's not the statistician general of the United States. And how does he know, even outside the United States, that most women, what is he polling every woman? Does he have a mandate from all women? All he's doing is trying to say, I'm an ally to hardworking women. He's virtue signaling. This is what he does 24/7 on. It's fucking boring. Dude. It's so boring. If I were a woman and I kept hearing these men trying to make themselves sound like they were my allies, I'd be over it by now. But it seems that there's no bottom to how deep you can dig in terms of trying to ingratiate yourself with people who you actually aren't doing anything for. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, let him go because he's got a show.
Sounds like you miss the old Trevor.
I really do. I mean, he used to just
really sounds like he's hurt you because like Trevor, peak Trevor was just amazing. He was just lovely.
Yeah, lovely. I knew Trevor. We used to get along really well. I don't have any problem with him. I'm delighted for his success. I've been absolutely consistent on that. Makes me proud to know that there's a South African kicking some ass on late night. But unfortunately, all of these late night guys, not just Trevor, but all of them, the Jimmies, all they're doing now is being as politically correct as possible. They do not ever go at their own elite people. Hollywood is untouchable. It's a sacred cow. And they seem to be completely incapable of doing anything that is just purely funny, especially if it means that someone has to be made fun of, especially if it's someone on their side. And I don't think these people are entertaining like they should be. Because, of course, these days they get into too much trouble when they are entertaining.
Now, the paycheck isn't for that anymore. The paycheck is now for specific conversations that'll rile people up in this specific way. It's not for those jokes anymore.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what Carl DeSantos is saying in the comments as well. He's saying he's not evolving. He's paid by the left, and he is paid a fuck ton of money. If you paid me that much, I'd also evolve.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I mean,
you don't know what's going on.
They paid to uphold a narrative. I just think it's so boring. Anyway, the opposition Democratic Alliance has called for changes to be made at Home Affairs. Who's not for this, right? They say they've been inundated with complaints from people all over the country saying Home Affairs offices in their areas have been unbearable with very long queues. Specific issues include allegations of bribery and continuous IT system downtime. So why can't they sort this out?
Because it's too far gone.
If they sort it out, they can't be corrupt anymore. If they sort it out, they can't, steal our money, and they can't.
The chain of corruption.
Exactly. That's literally the only thing. Like missing dockets, system is offline, blah blah blah. All that stuff is like counter the corruption, and they can't afford that. That's what's keeping them going.
I think you're right, because I told you about my awesome experience, which I was not paid for, which I did not do as part of some project with the Department of Transport. I went to the office to get my new driver's license, and it was an absolute pleasure. It can be done right, but you have to have people who don't have their hand in the till. That comes right from the top. So good luck, but it can be done. So let's see what the DA does by releasing this statement, because, of course, releasing statements always gets things done too. In other news, a couple bought a house for 2 million rand in cash, and then they were ready to move in, but the family that was in there didn't want to move out.
Huh?
Yep.
That can happen. And tenants, if they were tenants, they've got their rights are much more important than any homeowner.
Right.
You've got to be so careful. And I know this because I've just sold my house to an eviction attorney. So I had to be extra careful in terms of occupational rent and clauses.
I don't see how a squatter gets to make the rules. If you own the property, you should be able to. This is standard.
It's not like that. It's very different now, especially during COVID.
It's twisted. I'm sorry. There's no way that in any sensible society that has ever existed on planet Earth, that someone can just come and squat on your property that you own, that you paid for. This couple paid 2 million rand in cash. They've paid the house off, but they're sleeping in friends' houses on the sofa because these people won't get out of their house. They're squatters.
This happens all over the world. A lot. You see it happen in Australia, in America. It happens here. It's a crazy concept.
You know where this doesn't happen? This doesn't happen in the Congo or in Nigeria, because they will come in with a gun and chase you the fuck out if they own the property. And they'll
have you seen Bad Neighbor on Netflix? It's exactly that. It's like people that just come into your home and just don't fuck off. There's a worse ending. Sometimes you die, but it's basically the concept of like just people being in your space, and really the law protects them. They're the ones who are in the right because they're the tenants. It's so shitty.
I'm from the South, says Carl. I don't care if it's tenants or 11 ants. I'll fucking break legs, brother.
10 ants or 11 ants.
Oh, well, that's good.
Thank you, Carl. There's a little bit of fun this morning. It's a legal principle. This is correct from Leigh-Ann. Huur gaat voor koop. Lease goes for purchase. And it's been around forever in South African law. Well, it shouldn't be. And I don't believe it's correct. If you own the property, chase the people out with violence. Violence.
Scare them away.
And another tip, if you are selling your home and the person does want to take occupation before the bond is received, then never enter into an agreement of a normal lease with them. It should always be occupational rent, because you've got more rights as a homeowner over people with an occupational rent contract than the other.
Absolutely right. Very, very good. Okay. Just by the way, it seems that all over the world, COVID travel restrictions are being dropped for the vaccinated and unvaccinated. So that is starting to happen.
For the washed and the unwashed.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the latest news that I've just got an update on the social media about. But let's turn our attention now to what's going on with your money. It's time for Beyond Bitcoin with Revix. And this morning we are joined by Chris Beamish. Chris, it's always nice to see you. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Good. So, Chris, it's been another week of some interesting developments in the world. And I mentioned the other day that all investment categories are pretty much in the toilet at the moment. Investors all over are feeling awful. I mean, I've got like a little bit of an investment on the JSE. Naspers is just a big swirling toilet at the moment. There is no reason that anyone should have Naspers shares. All they've done for me is go down. They're almost half of what they were worth when I bought them, which is extremely annoying. I have some Amazon shares in the US. Those are in the toilet too. PayPal's disgusting. That's really bad. The only thing that people seem to have done okay on is gold and cryptocurrency. Luckily, two things that Revix offers, right?
Yep. In recent times, Naspers is practically half from where I used to own it. Unfortunately, I don't own it anymore. But
if only I'd spoken to you in that week, you could have told me, and I would have sold the damn things.
You see, also, I tried to make the Bitcoin market pump this morning, and within 2 hours, it shot up to just shy of 42, straight back down to 39. So I can't bring you fantastic news this morning.
Okay, but let's just talk about what is going on in the markets, because there seems to be this general malaise. It isn't clear for any investor what they should be putting their money in, because you ultimately, the reason you invest, whether it's 5 Rand, whether it's 500 Rand, or whether it's 5 million Rand, is so that your money is at least worth the same, if not a little bit more. What's going on in the markets? What's global inflation looking like, and whose fault is this?
I mean, not to point figures anyway, but it's obviously just government's fault, to be honest with you.
Point
dreadful monetary policy from all governments around the world.
Right.
I mean, inflation in the US is currently CPI figures, inflation 7.9%, which is the highest we've seen in 40 years. And inflation here is about 5.7%, which is the first time in 40 years that the inflation here has actually been lower than the US, which is pretty nuts. But all of this really means that 1 rand now is buying you less in the future, and all we're trying to do is offer products that allow you to actually protect that purchasing power. So that's why we were talking about gold, Bitcoin, which are two investments that have actually recently performed well on this bad inflation news and all these bad figures coming out.
Okay, so it's because of governments that are just printing money, and this obviously happened as a result of the coronavirus, but it's also as a result of their policies during coronavirus. So again, thanks to the politicians, hardworking people, Trevor Noah, please take note, hardworking people everywhere are worth less right now than they were probably 2-3 months ago, on average. There are a few people.
Less, yeah.
There are a few people who've made some very smart or very lucky trades over the last while, but generally the world is having a much tougher time, and the money that you earned is worth less. Now, this is very annoying.
Gareth, there's also a bit of accounting gymnastics there, or some very creative kind of numbers. They often measure inflation, which is CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is like a basket of goods that the average person buys, and they measure the price of that basket of goods over time, and that's how they measure inflation. They constantly change what's in the basket. So you and I know that the price of food, petrol, it's all skyrocketing. It's not going up by 5.7% here. It's not going up by 7% in the US. Inflation really is like 15 to 20% currently in the US. If you're using like the old 1980 way of measuring inflation.
Yes.
So they're definitely misleading the public too, which is certainly not the right way to go about this. I mean, that's who they're supposed to be serving. That's who pays their bills at the end of the day.
That's interesting. I didn't even know that they're changing the ingredients of the basket of goods. So effectively, that could mean that inflation is even worse than they say it is.
Precisely.
Oh my God. All right, this is not great news. And I don't bring you on here to upset people. But let's be fair. I mean, everywhere investments are down. Is there any way to counter all of this? Is there something we can do to at least hold on to what we've got?
Yep, definitely. I mean, we sat down about 3 weeks ago, and all of this inflation news is coming out. And that's when we decided to launch this inflation shield bundle. Most people absolutely love gold because of the protection it offers you. It's been around for 6,000 years. It's the main monetary metal, and in any kind of like war or any disaster that's going on, most people flight into gold, because no matter what, humans will always find that shiny rock valuable, pretty much. And it's used in component parts of electronics. So no matter what going forward, gold will pretty much always be valuable. And we coupled that with a little bit of Bitcoin to actually up the performance of gold and make sure that you always are outperforming inflation. And I mean, the favorite statistic that we came across last week was that over the last year, our inflation bundle that we've back tested for the past 6 years or so, last year, the performance was actually better than the two components inside, which is gold and Bitcoin. And it's like, how on earth is that possible? We rebalance monthly. So if gold is a great month, you rebalance down and you actually increase your Bitcoin there. Oh, that's the promotion we're running at the moment. So the next 2 days.
Sorry, did I jump the gun? You are running but this is the same thing you're talking about, the inflation.
It's exactly it. It's on the inflation shield bundle. So it's two fantastic products there. Realistically, over the next 2 days, we've got 0 buy-in fees. So when you try and purchase the bundle from us, you'll get absolutely no fees charged on that. And obviously, we're doing a cover promotion. So any losses you incur while investing 20,000 Rand in that bundle is completely covered by us. And any upside you get to keep. But yeah, to go back to what the actual bundle is, it's 75% gold, 25% Bitcoin, kind of like an old age store of value and a new age store of value. And frankly, I personally love it. And I think it's a great product for most people to certainly research and start looking into, because it's definitely necessary nowadays to start protecting your wealth, start protecting your purchasing power going forward.
Okay, so just one other quick thing about inflation, because you explain these things better than I do. If you have money saved, that's largely the group of people we've just been talking to, and people who want to invest some money. That sounds terrific. At least there's some way that you can maintain, the shred of dignity that you still have in terms of your money. But what about the people who actually owe money? Because inflation also affects them very badly. When interest rates go up, they have to pay more for their debt.
Well, it depends. I mean, that's a bit more complicated. Unfortunately for savers, savings is always a fantastic thing to do. But when inflation is very high, you need to be investing to beat inflation. If you're in like a very indebted situation and your interest rates can change, or you have a variable or like a fluctuating interest rate, you can really get screwed over when interest rates start to rise, which is currently, well, looking like it's going to start happening around the world. The interest rates are set to start rising. I think if you look at the markets, you can generally see what people are forecasting based on where the investments are. And in the US, they're predicting 7 rate hikes during 2020. Oh my God. During 2022.
All right, one last thing. A lot of these countries, a lot of these governments in various countries, including the government of the UK and certainly the government of China, are going to put out their own digital cryptocurrencies. They're going to do this because ultimately they're going to be programmable digital currencies, which is exactly the opposite of what a cryptocurrency should be. It should be decentralized. These are going to be centralized cryptocurrencies where the government can actually manipulate the money in your account directly. Now, I don't know how anyone in the world would want to go along with this, but clearly this is something they think people are just lining up for.
It's probably one of the worst things that could possibly happen. Realistically, if you just give it like a situation here. So all of us get paid 100 Rand right now as our salary, whatever it is. And the government says you have to spend it by the end of the month or it disappears. That's exactly what a CBDC or central bank digital currency really is. And that's what they mean by programmable. If they don't like your political views, Gareth, they'll tell you that you can't spend your money. Yeah. And that this whole kind of government control and them telling you that the money that you had in your bank account, no, sorry, that's actually ours. It's the worst thing that can be possibly imagined right now. I mean, in such a horrible financial situation, you don't want that.
I can't imagine a thinking person who would be for this, because if you look at how, Nkosi Sana Dlamini Zuma told us we couldn't buy hot chickens from Woolworths once. If we had a digital national cryptocurrency in South Africa and someone like her was in charge of it, because it would be someone like her, you wouldn't be able to buy the things she didn't approve of. Now, I mean, that's insane. You can't spend your own money that you worked for the way you want to spend it. It's crazy. But this seems to be something that the Chinese are very, very big on. And I heard the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain tabling the same ideas as if it's a good one.
Well, realistically, it all just supports all the corruption that's going on in governments globally. All this does is serve them at the end of the day. So if they control the money, they can basically just keep on beefing up their paychecks, lining their pockets, But this whole government control of your money is one of the main reasons why, personally, and most people are interested in Bitcoin, is because absolutely nobody can control it. If you try and control the network, you will fail. Everybody is consistently trying to hack this, what is it, an $800 billion network nowadays, to try and soak all the money out of it. And it's physically impossible. So that's why you own your money. Nobody can control it. And nobody can steal it from you. That's one of the main investment theses behind it. And gold, to be frank, because if you hold your gold, nobody can steal that.
Long live Bitcoin, long live. That's what we're going for here. All right. Exactly. So, Chris, thanks very much. There's a special promotion going on. You can go and check that out at revix.com. If you haven't already, sign up there and get your money out of government's greedy hands. That's the best way to put it. All right. Thanks so much.
Great advice.
Nice to see you.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Cool, dude. Bye-bye. There's Chris Beamish from revix.com, REVIX.com. A lot of people here talking about cryptocurrencies. We've got parallel parking talking about Shibu Inu, which is another cryptocurrency. In fact, that comes up almost every week. But there are lots of people also talking about how they've invested here and there and they've lost money and they've gained money. And listen, if you can find a way to invest somewhere and have 0% chance of loss, which is the special promo that they've got on for a month. I mean, even if it's just for a month, I would rather put something where I guaranteed not to make a loss. That sounds like an absolute win to me.
Yeah.
Go and check it out. All right. Lots of good stuff. We've got plenty more to come. It's almost 7:00. We've, as I said, got Blind History on the way too. Lebang is here and Leigh-Ann is here. And Simpiwe is in the studio in Joburg, and the rest of the team as well. We're going to be taking care of you over the next few days while I'm away. Who had the Hardy-Dar there? Is that yours, Leigh-Ann, or is it your Hardy-Dar?
Yes, it was Leigh-Annish. It was my friend. That was Robert.
Robert the Hardy-Dar. Okay.
Yes, he flies over at exactly 6:57 every morning.
Okay. That they are like some people use them as an alarm clock. Some people just bloody hate them.
Our chickens are so like 2000.
Yeah, no, you don't want. You'd rather watch. Very nice. Has anyone ever thought that maybe because there seem to be so many of them, maybe we could eat Haarie-Dars? But I mean, I'm not offering to be the first one to eat them, but surely we could use these things better.
Listen, chefs all around the world are always looking for some kind of new meat to serve. I'm thinking a lot of them have tried it, and it's probably not palatable, because if it was, we'd be eating them.
100%. There's a reason why we just need to listen to them and not eat them. Someone has definitely tried.
Okay, sure. Lebang, considering your dietary advice yesterday, I'm not going to try.
My dietary advice or our dietary advice, Gareth? Take accountability for the part that you played.
Oh man. Yeah. Wow. This is a scary thought. Conspiracy theories that have a hint of truth. The NWO is definitely a thing. New World Order. That's from Stevie. Parallel Parking saying Bitcoin will be a memory in 2025 and gone 24 hours after it's announced who created it. Then all cryptos without fundamentals will die without their Bitcoin tether. Then the crypto market begins. Oi, okay, don't say that.
Oof, don't scare us away.
Please. Cheryl says she has Haarie-Dars that fly over clockwork every morning. I call them Paul and Steve.
I wonder if they're afraid of Robert.
Good idea to name them, hey? Like, you shouldn't name like these things. It's just apparently not what one should do.
No. Mine are named Alive, and if I can get my gun in time, dead.
Oh, Lord.
And apparently they're protected, though. You're not allowed to shoot Haarie-Dars.
Yeah, I mean, I rescued one once.
Ugh.
And they were very grateful.
Yeah.
They were the rehabilitation center was very grateful to have him, and they phoned me with progress reports.
Can I tell you something? They are full of ticks and fleas.
They're gross.
Probably no more than any other animal that roams around in the koppies.
Have you seen a Haarie-Dar close up? They're very ugly creatures.
They're not the
prettiest.
prettiest.
Doesn't matter if they're ugly.
I know we have this thing, though. We humans have agreed amongst ourselves that cute animals we must conserve and look after. The ugly ones we don't care about.
They don't make the cut.
No, that's not true. I mean, rhinos are not the prettiest in the world. There's certainly no parrot.
I never said I was a big fan of rhinos.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
don't even go there.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I remember that I was once au pairing a couple of years ago, this family that lived in Sandton, extremely wealthy family. And one of the kids found like a bird in the park. And she was like losing her mind, like, we need to get in the car, rush to the vet now. She put it in a box. Like, it was all cute and stuff until like I spent the next 4 hours at a vet because this bird that she found in the park needed like incredibly medical attention very quickly. And I was sitting there like, am I getting paid overtime, or can I
I'm sorry, but I'm that person. If there's a pigeon that's been knocked over or something, I take it to the vet.
All right. Hey, you know what? That's why we've got people like you. Thank God for it, Leigh-Ann.
Yeah.
Haarie-Dars, I draw the line somewhere. You have to draw the line somewhere. I mean, Remember when Lebang turned Bobotie racist, says Christy? Yeah, that was yesterday.
That was just a day ago, actually. Christy was so touched.
Here's Dr. Robin with her final comment on this. You know why Haarie-Dars make that noise? Because they're scared of heights. All right, thank you very much. We will be back in the next couple of minutes with the rest of the show and plenty more. Stick around, cliffcentral.com, Wednesday. Middle finger to the authorities and the wealthy people. The fact that he preached about love. This idea that Jesus was this meek and mild guy is also completely false. He went into the second temple and turned over their money tables because he said they were all false prophets and they were disrespecting the house of the Lord. He's meant to have risen from the dead.
And walked on water.
There are also a bunch of people who say that he had mental health conditions. Do you suffer from collectivism?
I started collecting when I was about 8 years old.
Do you have an obsession with objects?
I sort of got into collecting TV cars.
Are you a fanatic? A devotee? Are you someone exhibiting enthusiasm or strong passion?
When lockdown hit, when everyone was kind of bored at home, they started Googling, like, what are these things worth these days?
Cliff Central dispenses a weekly dose of collectomania. Join me as I talk to compulsive collectors. Fascinating.
The frame's total value is probably about 12,000 Rand.
Possibly a little weird.
I developed this infatuation with the Statue of Liberty.
Collectomania, Mondays on the Gareth Cliff Show. Brought to you by SA Gold Coin Exchange and The Scoin Shop. All right, it's Wednesday morning on cliffcentral.com. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've got some blind history for you a little bit later on, and it's the final episode of this season, which is not the last season. There will be more. That's the good news. And we've also got a bonus episode for you next Wednesday at the same time. So stick around for that. The subject of today's episode is Jesus of Nazareth. And what made this complicated is that there's obviously the Jesus of the Gospels, and there's the Jesus that Christians all over the world believe was the Son of God. And then there's the historical Jesus. And as you know, it's called blind history, not blind religion or blind mythology or any of that stuff. So we had to really surgically separate the supposed historical record of Jesus. And I say supposed because there's lots of controversial opinion on what's actually admissible evidence that this person, I mean, it's generally agreed that he existed. But what the evidence is outside of the Gospels and the religious documents that proves that this was a real person. And we've only decided to do an episode on Jesus because there is enough evidence that he actually existed and that he was a pretty extraordinary human being, no matter what you think. So that's coming up at 7:30 this morning. But it's going to make some people angry because, you know, they've got a certain view on this, and that view is massive to them. It defines their lives. And other people who go, he was just a person. So we've got to look at this as if he is a historical figure rather than a person in religion. So if you're looking for that, then that's on today, our final episode of this season of Blind History. Lebang Hosanna is here and Leigh-Ann Mole is here, and we'll be talking in a moment or two about all the things that we want to get off our chests this morning. And if you've got something that you want to get off your chest, you can do that too by joining in the fun. Just come into the YouTubes live and drop us a comment. Lots of people do. You can also send us comments. You know, we get lots of emails from people. We also get videos from people. If you want to send us a quick 30-second video of you with comments so we can see who you are, that would be nice too. Contact at cliffcentral.com, or even a voice note if that's what you want to drop. We would love to hear it. We can play out your video message here live on the show as well. So tell us what you think of that. Okay.
Leigh-Ann, can I quickly just ask Leigh-Ann, like, I saw her holding an entire kettle not long ago. I just need to confirm that I'm not actually crazy. And that was girl. Oh, it's a water.
It's a water filter.
I was like,
a whole kettle.
an entire kettle. Teach me your ways.
No, I promise.
Do you know that some people put like 2-minute noodles directly into the kettle?
Yes, I've seen that.
Filthy
But
people.
what's also gross about that, there are two things. The first thing is that a lot of times our kettles have these scales, and I'm sure those noodles fluff up those scales. So you'll be eating those instead of your seasoning spice. And the other thing is you're now putting seasoning spice into the kettle.
Ugh.
And then you're having tea afterwards, or like hot lemon water.
Assuming that they're actually putting the spice inside the kettle, they probably put the spice like directly onto the noodles. Like
Maybe
putting the spice
afterwards,
inside the kettle. Well, look, if you're putting noodles in the kettle, you're capable of anything. So
people boil eggs in kettles. Says
No,
Robin.
man, come on.
yeah, that I know.
Split and stink.
There's a reason you have different equipment in the kitchen for different things. And I'm saying that as someone who really doesn't know what the kitchen is for. But I mean, at least I know that much. I used something the other day to steam vegetables, which I thought was quite cool. It was a present I got like 5 years ago from somebody, and I managed to figure it out. I mean, it was there. It makes steam. You put the vegetables in the top of it, and voila!
It's a steamer.
I felt so accomplished. You would have been proud of me.
Okay, well done. You say we should be proud of you, but, but your progress is your progress in general in the kitchen is very slow.
Hey,
I mean,
listen.
it's been over a decade, even longer. You first sliced an avo, and then you were very proud of yourself, and now you're steaming vegetables. It's not.
I'm sorry, I'm not giving you props for that, Gareth. Like, I'll give you props when you've like really, like, yeah, you've taken it to the top.
The reason they won't even put me on that "Come Dine with Me" show. Well, they have asked. I've just said no, because what the hell am I going to do?
No, you can't. It's it's like some people can't do certain things. Blind people can't drive buses. You can't be on "Come Dine with Me."
Sure, what a comparison, eh?
Steve E has good advice here. Says, do not use a hotel kettle. Some people use them to boil their underwear.
Yeah, I've told you guys before. I have a friend who was in the hotel industry, and they discovered a shit in the kettle.
No, man. No. Oh, what is wrong with people?
Students.
May I
That's all I'm
ask?
going to say.
What is the actual purpose of boiling your undies?
I've never done that, so I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. That's not something
if you've had a really messy experience.
No, my God. Why would you boil them in the kettle? Yes, man.
I don't know.
I have nothing to say to that. If you know such people, immediately hand them over to the authorities. Okay.
And remove yourself from them, because why do you know such people?
Yeah. Get away. All right. Carl says people should not be eating 2-minute noodles. They killed those kids just the other day. Although my wife, she likes my 2-minute noodle.
Oh my God.
Gareth, have you ever had Carl on the show? May I please request?
No, you can ask him. I'm not going to have him. It's enough. His comments are bad enough.
Just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes of his time.
Hell no. No. So I did get a message on Instagram from one of our listeners this morning, Fern, who said she had a dream. Let me read this to you. This is so weird. She said, I had a dream about solar flares last night. I mean, this is a pretty specific dream. It even showed me which parts of the world would be affected if there was a solar flare. I Googled it this morning, and apparently we had a giant solar flare this past Sunday. So maybe Fern is like the Nostradamus of our time. You don't know. I mean, there's no reason why one of our listeners shouldn't be the next great prophet, right?
But it depends which came first, the solar flare or her dream.
I think the solar flare was last Sunday, but maybe there are more coming. And she had a dream because it's a portent of things to come, Leigh-Ann. In which case, because these have you ever heard what these solar flares can do? That they can act like an electromagnetic pulse and just basically blitz every electronic circuit that they reach.
We've been affected before worldwide. Yes. We had this global issue from a solar flare with our internet connections. Our laptops were freaking out. No.
Just imagine the world if suddenly everybody's phones were blitzed. It would be a very different world. We in some places, you might even go back to like the Stone Age. People smashing rocks together to make shit happen because they wouldn't be able to order Uber Eats. Can you imagine?
Complete chaos.
It would be chaos. We don't think about that. We just take it for granted that technology is going to get better and then we can keep moving forward. But if we actually if there were the equivalent of a huge EMP and maybe it was caused by a solar flare or something, and it just toasted every, electronic circuit in the world, we would be screwed, man. A lot of people they wouldn't be able to do anything.
They wouldn't be able to move.
Nothing.
We adapted quite well with COVID. I reckon there might be some good ideas. I don't think it would be completely over time.
I already see this chaos. Like when I take my phone away from my 2-year-old because she's maybe had too much screen time, it's already that chaos. It's screaming and shouting and punching. And like when there's load shedding, it's the same thing. It's like, why can't I just switch on the screen? This is all I've known. And I can't imagine like that on a global scale when we just can't use Google Maps. How would we get to places?
So bad. It was so worst, right? I mean, we've become so dependent. We wouldn't, I say that as someone who thinks that I'm independent in some ways. Obviously, there are places where that's just not true. I mean, I'd probably be okay. I've told you about my zombie apocalypse fantasy, right? Where I dream that I'm the only one who survived the zombie apocalypse, and that I would be able to rebuild civilization. But I'm not so sure. I don't think I would. I think I'd be a bit screwed.
It's quite a heavy job, hey?
Yeah.
I'll leave it to someone else.
Big job.
Let's pick someone else.
Yeah.
Someone who can work their way around a steamer in the kitchen, maybe.
I'm not even going to be upset. I mean, I won't need the steamer in your kitchen because there won't be any energy. What you'll need is someone who can hunt food, someone who can actually grow things and hunt things. You know, you've got to draw up your plan for like your dream team. And everybody, the skills that you think you have now that are so valuable that you'd put on your CV
will be so unnecessary. It'll be like back to basics, like literally.
Yeah. I mean, for you, Lebang, you could always list that you are, you're a mom and you can raise kids, because that would be a valuable skill.
You can bring humans into the world.
Right.
Yeah. And clearly I'm good at it. I mean,
definitely.
I'll be like the village surrogate.
Yeah, right. And I mean, if you could do that, then you'd always be welcome in my zombie apocalypse team.
Does that mean I made it on your list?
You may just make it on the list. I think you're definitely a contender. I'm trying to think what skills I could convert my current ones into, because no one's going to need someone who talks shit.
You could do chemical shit.
Yeah, aren't you you into that stuff? You can find like solutions for us based on.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a laboratory that would make me useful, and I can do things like purify water, I suppose, and I can. Yeah, I could do useful. I could maybe do a little bit of very basic first aid. That's a skill I could use. I've got guns. I could shoot and I can hunt. So that would be useful. But I'm trying to think what else. Got swords as well. If if it comes down to a fight between two swordsmen, we're not in 1300, but if we were, I'd be useful.
Yeah. I would probably be the court jester, but besides that,
yeah, we need that.
I would probably be able to warn you before you do anything about what the consequences could be from experience.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You've had so many bizarre experiences in your life that you'd probably be, don't do that because. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I do think that
this will happen.
I think that's quite far down the line of things we need, though, Leigh-Ann. I mean, not being mean, but.
Yeah, you're not sorry, but you're not going to be like a priority.
So if you start at 6, I'll join at 7.
Right, exactly. So listen, Comair, Kulula, big trouble at the moment because 2 of their planes are grounded because of engine failure. And I mean, ironically, South African Airways Technical, because that's still a thing, are the ones who service Comair's planes. But anyway, they've been grounded, which meant that a whole lot of people who were meant to have traveled, I was meant to have a meeting on Monday afternoon with someone from Cape Town. They had to cancel because all those flights were canceled and people were then booking on, what was it? Fly Sapphire. 8,000 Rand a flight. People were furious. Between Cape Town and Joburg. Can you imagine paying 8 grand? 8 grand is like what you would pay for a flight to Bali, And now you're paying it to Cape Town. So people were furious. They were stranded in Cape Town and stranded in Johannesburg because they booked on Comair, on Kulula, or on British Airways. And they've just been shut down. So obviously the competitors are like, okay, well, we see a chance to make some money here. And that sounds like price gouging to me.
Yeah. 8,000 is like a bit much.
But what's scary is that people will pay. Like, you'll go to Cape Town. You'll find that 8,000 if you want to go.
Oh, yeah. No, I think, if you're stuck somewhere and you need to get back to your family or your job, people, it's amazing how in a crisis situation, like you imagine trying to escape Ukraine, you'd give pretty much every cent you have to get it.
But I mean, that's when you're trying to escape death and destruction. Sure. But if you're just trying to get home in time for the Sunday braai, then I'm sure it would be cheaper to rent a car and drive it up. Or down.
Have you been to, you say it's to escape death and destruction. Have you been to Johannesburg? There's quite...
Capetonians stuck here are like, I'm seeking asylum in Cape Town. Please give me a lift.
I don't understand why these airlines are able to, sure, in Comair's case, they've been shut down by, I suppose it's the Civil Aviation Authority, because of these 2 planes with the engine failure. And that is a serious thing. but they should be able to communicate with the people who've spent money with them. They should be able to issue vouchers for the next flight or whatever, or even get the other airlines to help, and then they cover the cost of it later or something, or they work out some kind of a deal. I don't understand how this is allowed to go on.
They've never cared enough about the people that are doing the flying. If you've sent us your money, it's our money now. Full stop. They never really go, the extra mile to refund you or to give you that said voucher. It's always like your loss and too bad. You should have, thought about another airline. It's quite shitty, actually. I think they know it's because it's the offerings are limited. We don't have that many other options. It's just them.
No, exactly.
And within that price bracket, it's just them. So we'll obviously do what we need to do.
I mean, we effectively have 2 airlines left in domestic flights in South Africa. That's FlySafair and Airlink. Those are only Those are the only 2 left. So here we are. We were thinking that prices were going to go down in the long run. Well, it turns out they haven't. Turns out competition is a good thing. The more people there are in a space to compete, the better the prices. So we're learning lessons here that we should have been paying attention to much earlier on. And again, there's one glaring, ugly gorilla in the room that nobody's talking about, and that's SAA, who got themselves into this mess and started the whole house of cards, right? All of this is as a result of dumb government policy. That's all I can say. And no surprises there, anybody. I saw this woman on the news last night. She was losing it. She was shouting and screaming, and I mean, rightly so. In the airport, she's like, this is unacceptable. They take our money. They don't tell us what's going on. They don't communicate anything. And then we get stranded. And I've been stuck in this airport. I've got to get home. It's quite right. She's got every reason to be angry. And I'm on her side. Screw these guys. You don't have anything to say to that, Leigh-Ann?
I'm searching for a Kulula flight as we speak. I wanted to see what came up. Pretending I'm going to Cape Town this weekend. You can fly for 2,300 Rand.
Are they taking bookings again?
What?
Are they
Seems
open?
like they're taking bookings. Yeah.
Oh, well, let's see what happens there. I don't know about that, but you're on the internet doing it. Oh, there's also Lyft, but Lyft only to Cape Town, apparently.
Okay.
So I mean, listen, again, the more the merrier. There's a gap here, everybody. There's got to be a price point which is sweet, where you can make money as an airline, but where you can also deliver a basic service of getting people from A to B. I mean, I've never thought that planes were particularly luxurious. Even if you do fly in business or in first class on some of these things, it's still a bus in the sky. There's just a slightly bit part of the bus if you're in business class or whatever, but they are still buses. And you get on, and then there's queues before, and the queues at the end, and then the buses in between, the actual buses that take you to the planes very often. I hate when parked further away from the terminal. It's not the best way to travel, but it's probably the quickest and most convenient, most successful way to get from A to B. And we're used to it. Bring on more competition. Let all the airlines in. SAA is finished. We must mothball that thing and throw it away. Let's get some others in and let them do the job. We need them. Marty says he never got his mango refund in July either. Thank you. That's SAA, right? And I wonder how much money they owe people. I wonder. And remember Santaco Air? I actually did have an air. Remember there was a brief moment when Santaco Air was a thing? Well,
I just tried to book a mango flight, and it allowed me to put in the date and destination. And then when I pressed enter, it said, oops, something went terribly wrong.
Yeah, you're right. In the management of the airline all those years ago, that's what went terribly wrong. Yeah. But I just think it's ridiculous. Like 8,000 Rand a flight to Cape Town is just absolutely insane.
Yeah, no, that's bollocks. But I feel like there's just generally like some weird bad luck around these badly maintained airlines. Like from the top to the bottom, most of these pilots 20 or 30 years after flying, turns out they actually aren't even qualified.
Well,
and I mean, if you're like that guy, then what more the actual? Do you think there's anything right happening in those places? It's just all very messy and too monopoly-like and too greedy, and it's just man, people are like the people that are flying are always at the bottom of the barrel. Just know that, but we don't have a choice.
Dude69 says SAA still owe me money. Gave me a damn voucher. I'll probably have to write that off. Deolinda says, I had to travel on an emergency situation to Portugal during COVID. I'm waiting for the refund of 4 air tickets for a year, and no one cares, literally. So that's in Portugal. It's not even here in South Africa. So you know what? Yeah, these things are such a dodgy business. You just never know. You never know if you can get your money back. Okay, price gouging. It is a disgrace. Yes, absolutely, Tiger. You're 100% right. The big question, says Kala, is what does Discovery Vitality do with their Kulula affiliation? Well, they should cancel it, right? I mean, you don't want to be associated with a business that doesn't deliver on its promises. This is very, very bad for you. Talk about brand and reputation. Everybody thinks, oh, well, if we don't tweet in solidarity with Ukraine, that's bad for our brand. Actually, it's much worse if you aren't actually delivering on the service that people engage you with.
Right, like do your job, make sure the house lights are kept on, and then you can start with all that other stuff.
Yeah, putting a Ukraine flag in your profile picture.
Hey, man.
SAA owes my son 59,000 rand since before COVID, says Sweetie. Jesus.
Damn.
Wow. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of flights.
They owe a lot of people money.
They really do. Hey, it's big problems. Anyway, all right. That's pretty much all we got time for this morning. We've got to get to blind history number 2. What should I do in Mexico? Any suggestions from you before I go?
I would strongly recommend finding one of those skull-shaped tequila bottles.
Excellent.
Polishing off one of those and trying to get back with the seawater.
Excellent. I shall do as much of that as is humanly possible without ending up in jail. Lebang, any final words of advice from you on what I should do in Mexico?
Just make the content great. Try fall in love and just end up eloping and just like staying there. And then you'll just run your life from there and we'll run the fort from here.
If I ghost you, you're not going to be upset with me.
No. Look, Gareth, I encourage that. Like Gareth, location, last seen in Mexico 4 years ago.
But you know that could mean I've been kidnapped. I mean, because that does happen.
Hey, so we mustn't just presume that you've fallen in love. We must dig a bit deeper.
Okay, take it from me. Having known me for as long as the two of you have, what are the chances that I'm just going to fall in love and disappear and completely abscond from my job?
See you next week.
As opposed to just being kidnapped against my will.
If you see you next week. It means you've been kidnapped or you've fallen into some trouble bringing back seawater. So we'll look for you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Look after things, and I shall see you on the flip side and have an excellent time. And everybody will be here to look after you. Let's end off with the episode of Blind History, the final one for this season. It is the episode on Jesus, and I leave you with this high. As I head off, I will see you soon. It's generally agreed by scholars, both historical and religious, that something special happened between the years 1 and 4 AD. We can't be sure whether there were shooting stars, miracles, or 3 wise men, but it is beyond dispute that 2,022 years later, whatever happened in the Holy Land changed the world forever. Civilizations would rise and fall. Mighty popes and kings would bend the knee. Billions of people would view their lives with a singular reference point: the life of Jesus of Nazareth. We've reached the grand finale of season 6 of Blind History. Me and my co-host Anthony Medera ready to bring you one last episode for this season. And this was a tough one to choose, but I suppose it's one of the names that keeps coming up, and absolutely one of those people who's affected history more than probably anybody else that we've ever covered.
Correct. I mean, sooner or later we had to cover Jesus. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. So look, this is going to be complicated, and I'm going to say up front as a kind of disclaimer, there are a few historical records outside of the Gospels, but they really are few and far between. So if you are a devout Christian or even an Orthodox Jew or a Muslim who's devout, and you believe in whatever it is you believe in, whether that's that Jesus was or was not the Son of God, that he was or was not the Messiah, I'm going to ask you to suspend disbelief. And this is called blind history. And we're going to go into this blind, but we're also going we're going to go into it with a historical approach rather than a religious approach. So there are plenty of stories about the life of Jesus, but most of them originate in the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which if you received any kind of Bible education at school in the Western world, you will know well. And some of them have huge disparities between them. Furthermore, a lot of them were written, I think the earliest of them was the Gospel of Mark, which was written in about AD 70 and later compiled into what would have been the Bible with a few changes along the way by ultimately Emperor Constantine, who we've covered in a previous episode at the Council of Nicaea. But let's just get into what we do know about the life of Jesus, because most scholars have agreed that he was an absolutely real person, that he did exist historically, that the quest for the historical Jesus has brought up probably more uncertainty than it has reliability and evidence. And that's also because of the time he lived in.
To paint a picture, I think just to start off with, to look at the time, exactly what you said, that he lived in. So it's the Roman Empire at really building towards its height. At the time, I believe it was Augustus that was the emperor. But the way he was growing his empire and how he set up his empire is important to note. So Herod the Great, which is mentioned a lot in the Bible, was basically in charge of that particular region, to put it as simple as that. And he subsequently passed away during the time of Jesus's birth. So that changed the face a little bit, but what Augustus put in place were prefects. A famous one related to the story is Pontius Pilate, and he played a big role. And I think everybody that, as you said, have studied or read the Bible or know the story around Jesus knows about Pontius Pilate.
So we know that for a fact that Pontius Pilate lived. We also know, thanks to the historian Josephus, who was writing during the time of Vespasian, that he mentions Jesus, who is called the Christ. And that's outside of the Gospels. And he was not a fan of this newfangled religion. Josephus was a Jewish scholar and a nobleman in Judea at the time. He worked for Emperor Vespasian later on, but he also mentioned John the Baptist, we know must have been a real person. And he refers to many of the events that might have occurred simultaneously with the life of Jesus, and many of the events which are mentioned in the Bible as part of history at the time. The problem is that outside of these, and there's one first-hand account of Josephus actually watching James, the brother of Jesus, being sentenced to death, for example, which puts us 2 degrees away from Jesus, which is quite impressive, if you take scholarly historians as a good reference. But the physical evidence is very hard to find, because Jerusalem was completely ruined. It was totally destroyed by Titus just a few years after the purported time that Jesus would have died. And therefore, there are no relics that we can say for sure come from that time. There are no piles of stone that we can absolutely say were there at the point that Jesus must have walked the streets of Jerusalem. So although everybody agrees he was a real person, it's very difficult to find any evidence outside of the Gospels themselves and the work of a few historians.
But I think that looking at similarities between the Gospels and starting to piece together, and I think that's where most of the evidence has come from, and then also from the Roman Empire. And during that period, the Jewish nation there was apathy. That would be a massive understatement. They hadn't ruled their own nation for the best part, I think, 68 years by that time. And Herod the Great wasn't a Jew. He wasn't a natural Jew, for that matter. He wasn't even part of the region.
And he wasn't very popular either.
Yeah. And then I think his sons were worse than he was.
His one son, Herod Antipas, because they were all called Herod, it's very difficult to keep track. He was the one who sentenced John the Baptist to be killed because his wife didn't like him.
Correct.
I mean, this is all stuff which is kind of accepted into the historical record. But I don't want us to worry too much whether there's too much myth or too much history, because frankly, as many people have pointed out, while we know that there were eyewitnesses to Socrates, many of the things that are attributed to the life of Socrates are just as difficult to prove as those that are attributed to the life of Jesus.
Yeah, it's such a long time ago.
Well, I don't have to overestimate or over-explain the significance and the importance of Jesus in the modern world. I mean, our calendar is based on the time he's supposed to have been born. And pretty much the most populous religion on earth is still Christianity. It's spread to all the corners of the world. His influence on the way people think, on the entire system of education, of politics, of everything in the Western world has been so affected by the teachings of this man that it's worth just looking at the major events of his life. So obviously, there are all kinds of stories about the way he was born in the Gospels, but he was essentially, the nativity is supposed to have taken place in Bethlehem, although he was always called outside of, the Gospels. He's always been called, and even in the few sources that we have from archaeology and so on, it's always called Jesus of Nazareth. So Nazareth seems to have been a much likelier place for him to have originated from, or certainly that's where he spent the majority of his childhood. Supposedly his mother Mary was a virgin, and she was visited by God and, gave birth to a child. And this child was supposed to be the Son of God. And certainly in his teachings, he claimed to be the Son of God. The nativity wasn't noted by anyone else, though. So outside of the religious community, no one would have taken any notice. And the Jewish scholars of the time paid no attention to Jesus until basically the time of his crucifixion.
Look, I think if Mary would have come to Joseph in 2022 and said, "I'm pregnant," but not by a human, I don't know how that would have gone down with Joseph.
I think Joseph might have been a little skeptical, but these were different times, and people were superstitious. And who are we to know? Because there's no way we can prove or disprove this. So
that's 100% right.
We know, for example, that at this time, as you mentioned, the Jewish religion was really being tormented on all sides. They were already onto their third temple in Jerusalem, and that was going to be destroyed again just a few years later by the Romans. The Romans ruled with an iron fist in Judea, and the Judeans, the Jews of the time, were not exactly well-behaved and obedient servants to the Romans. They were very often, and had been and would continue to be into the future, past the life of Jesus, rebellions, outbreaks of violence. They did not like being watched over by the Romans and considered the Romans to be an occupying force, which is, doubly ironic if you consider the situation which is now claimed by the Palestinians in modern Israel.
Yeah, there was constant revolts and uprisings. And when Herod, I think there was a big vacuum when Herod the Great died. And actually one of the first competitors, let's say, or to Jesus in a way, because at that time there was a lot of prophets around, and the Jewish people were looking for a leader. And Simon of Pariah, I think he was a slave to Herod, and he actually tried to become king. So he was knocked out quite quickly by the Romans, but that was just before Jesus's birth.
Well, we know a few things. We know that Jesus was a minister. There was a big gap in the Bible between kind of the nativity and Jesus is a very young man, and then when he reappears on the scene at around about age 30 and is already imbued with great wisdom, has a very cogent philosophy, goes around Jerusalem and much of the rest of Judea, Galilee, and so on, preaching and drawing huge crowds. And this must have made the Romans uncomfortable. It would have also made the Jewish Sanhedrin uncomfortable. The religious authorities of Judea at the time were not pleased when another prophet rose up, because this was kind of a mainstay in Jewish history. Many of those prophets are the ones who helped to put together what is the modern day understanding of a religion of Judaism. But there were loads of people vying for attention, as you rightly put it. And lots of them had all kinds of philosophies about how the world was started, how it would end. Many of the philosophies were apocalyptic. And in fact, there are scholars today who say that Jesus was one of the first apocalyptic prophets, that he was one of the first people to kind of predict the end of the world, which has been something which so many have said since then. And it always seems to get a lot of attention from people. The minute you tell people the end of the world is coming, they suddenly sit up and take notice. But he's
buy baked beans.
Buy baked beans or toilet paper. He appointed 12 apostles, and some of those went on to be real historical figures. We know, for example, that St. Paul, who was absolutely someone who we have many references for, came a few years after Jesus. St. Paul actually met John, James, the brother of Jesus, and St. Peter. And, with James being the brother of Jesus, I mean, that kind of gives credence to the fact that he must have been a real person who existed.
Yeah, I think there's little doubt. He was definitely a charismatic person at a time that the Jewish nation needed. Although, having said that, that was one of the reasons why he was crucified. But there's a very strong possibility that he was real.
Yeah. I mean, he also had a really unique way of preaching at the time, which was, I suppose, very attractive to people. He spoke in parables. He gave kind of sound bites rather than long droning speeches. And what he said was profound. He would say a little bit, but he would make sure that it really hit home. And therefore, I think we can take from the Gospels, certainly, that there is a correlation across all of them in the way that Jesus spoke and the things he spoke about and the style of speech that he delivered. And certainly that is part of his original appeal. But we also have to remember that it took Christianity a long time after that to get off its feet, or to get up on its feet and to start becoming a real power. I mean, 300 years later, it would be the biggest religion in that part of the world, and Rome would have to bow to Christianity rather than the other way around.
But I think as well that the big thing about he exhorted his followers is on the compassion and humility side. And that was something that people really needed. I mean, living in those times was brutal. Life was cheap, and you could be killed at any turn. And somebody that came in with this to look at the weak and the downtrodden and looking out for the poor, that resonated definitely with people. I mean, there was people were really, really poor in those days.
And unhappy because, as we've already explained, life was very hard. But also Jesus made a promise of a better future, and a better future in the afterlife, which was something very few people got right before then. I mean, what he'd say to people, for example, is, the blessed are the meek sermon, which he gave, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Or he'd say things that directly were, middle finger to the authorities and the wealthy people. It is easier for a rich man to pass through the eye of a needle, to kind of then to get into the kingdom of heaven. These kinds of things were massively appealing to ordinary people at the time. And the fact that he preached about love, for example, whereas a lot of religion up to then had been all about do this or the terrible things that will befall you afterwards are going to make you take the knee. In this case, it was kind of, I am the pathway to love. I am the pathway to a better universe hereafter, a better afterlife. And that kind of thing, obviously, people loved.
But also, on the other hand, as you rightly said, also earlier, provocative, because there were people that were making a living out of, beware, you will be punished if you do this or do that. I think it's famous in Jerusalem where we went into the temples and he
went into the second temple and turned over their money tables and everything that they were selling, because he said they were all false prophets and they were disrespecting the house of the Lord,
Yeah.
So he didn't have a problem causing trouble. And in fact, this idea that Jesus was this meek and mild guy is also completely false, because if you look at some of the things he said, the guy was all for the sword in the right situations, Famously, he's supposed to have done a whole lot of things that were miraculous. He's meant to have turned water into wine. He's meant to have fed many thousands of people with fish and bread. He's meant to have risen from the dead.
And walked on water.
The most incredible miracle available to any human being would be immortality. And Jesus is supposed to have cheated death and ascended back into heaven. And Christians have been dealing with what that means for mortal human beings ever since. But yes, I mean, an incredible, incredible life, and a life filled with stories that make him very human as well. The Last Supper, the Garden of Gethsemane. These are stories about someone who went through a tremendous amount of anguish, who came face to face with his own death and knew it was imminent, and decided to go ahead and not resist. I mean, he was betrayed by Judas. All of this stuff, which any student of religion will pretty much know by heart by now, is supposed to have happened towards the end. And then famously the crucifixion, which is probably the most horrible kind of punishment that the Romans could enact upon anyone at the time. And the symbol of that crucifixion has become probably the most well-regarded symbol in the world, even though it used to be a symbol of the most terrible thing.
Yeah, what made him so human was, God, have you forsaken me? Right at the end, he was actually crying out to be helped. Right till the very end, he was asking God to take him out of the situation. So it was a very real, extremely painful time, and very brave in what he did. And also coming into Jerusalem on that Passover weekend on a donkey, that was provocative. He knew he was going into the den of the lion.
Well, I think he'd accepted by then that this was his fate. And he probably knew or had some suspicion that his story would be told over and over again. And it's probably the most told story of all time. The Bible is still the best-selling book of all time. And that is in no small part due to the stories that are in the New Testament, the stories of Jesus. Obviously, early Christianity was very different to the Christianity of today. I mean, for example, there was no such thing as celibate priests or fasting or any of those things. A lot of this stuff was brought in by the authorities later on as a way to kind of mold the way people behaved. But, Jesus and his disciples ate well. They spent as much time around women as they did around men. A lot of the apostles were married, certainly in the beginning. They might not have been married towards the end. But Jesus is supposed to have also spoken Aramaic, which is, of course, the language that was spoken in that area at the time. But he could also speak Hebrew fluently, and may even have known a little bit of Greek. His disciples were not terribly well-educated people. I mean, Peter's supposed to have been a fisherman, and so their ability to write complicated letters, which also part of the New Testament, is called into question by many historians. They say, look, there's a certain amount of this that is attributed to the apostles, but may not have actually been them.
But then it's also practicing Jews. So there were certain things that come up from thousands of years prior, or let's say hundreds of years prior. So, there was circumcision. There were all sorts of things that were very, very important to the Jewish nation. And he was, first and foremost, he was a Jew.
Absolutely. And there are many people who say, well, he was only really preaching to Jews and he didn't intend for his gospels to reach Gentiles. It was more St. Paul's job to spread the word of Jesus to the non-Jews. And that may have been the case too. Again, how will we know? With so little to go on. But the Gospels, we have to piece together what we can from the story. I mean, it's undoubtedly the case that in all the world's religions, there are these messianic prophets who come and go. But I think it's also undoubtedly the case that Jesus has had an unbelievably outsized influence on the world. And now we're counting on 2022 years since the time of his birth, which has to be a record for any human being. And if there was a human being and it was a mortal human being at that point, I don't think you can say that there's anything but success in the ultimate story.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just phenomenal how it's come. And to work out why John the Baptist, who was probably more prolific in terms of sermons, in terms of preaching, why he wasn't the Son of God, etc. It's incredible that Jesus Christ was set as such and has built such a massive legacy.
Yeah, I mean, there are even modern writers like Reza Aslan who have an interesting take on Jesus, that he was a scholar and a teacher, but that he was nothing divine, and that much of his messaging was as regular as any of the messaging you'd find. I think that's probably a bit of a tough pill for a lot of Christians to swallow, and many of them, famously, there are Christian apologists in just the last century who made extremely good arguments for why Jesus and his teachings continue to be the best moral authority for human beings on earth today. These are people who have mined every possible source material. Of course, we've discovered a number of other gospels that were left out of the Bible by the Byzantines. And many of those gospels are now being integrated back into Christian thinking. There are the Gnostics, for example, who have a very different view of what Jesus and his life story may have been. There are also plenty of fictional accounts of the fact that Jesus may even have had a family and may even have been married and all kinds of other things. And again, we can't say for sure because there's such a dearth of real evidence.
But if anything, and what is brought to the world is compassion and love, humility, and looking out for your fellow human. I mean, that's all positive stuff.
Yeah, and you can equally lay at the door of Christianity many evils, the conquests of Spain and many other parts of the world, the Inquisition, the Crusades, the behavior of the Catholic Church in the modern era. You can say that all of that is an outgrowth of a kind of Christianity, but I don't think you can blame Jesus for any of that.
No, and I think those are just serial killer nut jobs that are using religion as their backdrop.
Justification.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think a lot of people have very interesting views about Jesus. There are also a bunch of people who say that he had, mental health conditions, and that maybe he was, like Nostradamus. He had this ability to prophesy things, but he was maybe a little bit ill. I mean, there's some controversial things people say. They talk about the Trinity idea, that there's God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, a very complicated thing that all the greatest Christian scholars have been debating for thousands of years now. But in the end, we know that this man must have been a real person. There's general agreement about that. He must have lived in and died in the area around Judea and died in Jerusalem specifically. There are places in Jerusalem, most of them were pointed out by Constantine's mother, Helena, that were supposedly the places where Jesus was crucified, where Jesus was buried, where he ascended into heaven. Just like Muslims venerate places where Muhammad is supposed to have ascended into heaven, where he was born, where he is buried. The difference is that we actually have a tomb for Muhammad. And in Medina, you can go and visit the tomb. Of course, no one's going to be brave enough to open it up, but should there be a body in there, that would put them in a better position than Christianity, because Jesus' body is supposed to have ascended into heaven completely. It is curious that the Romans, who were pretty good record keepers, and the Egyptians, where Jesus' parents are meant to have fled to, and also were excellent record keepers, don't mention anything about Jesus. They don't say a thing. And you would think that if there was this rabble-rousing troublemaker, which is the way that they would have seen him, or this incredible spiritual teacher, which is the way many early Christians would have seen him, they would have at least made mention of it in an otherwise, just rebellious and dangerous province. There might have been some interesting kind of sidebar conversations. Whether or not those have been lost to time, we'll never know. But Suetonius, Tacitus, Cassius Dio, they don't mention him.
But they do mention St. Peter or Peter.
Yes.
And they do mention Paul.
And they mention the Christians. So we know that there must have been an origin.
Agreed, 100%. So it is difficult to put it together. And also they're coming from an angle of, they call them Gentiles in those days where they're not part of the Jewish faith. They've been supporting Apollo or whatever it might be for the best part of 1,000 years. So it comes from a completely different place when they're reporting on that side of it.
Well, in the end, I don't suppose there's a better way to end the season than on the high note of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, who's, in the historical record as being probably one of the most powerful and influential people, certainly one of the most requested people in all of blind history's history, supposed to have lived between 4 BC or thereabouts and AD 30 to 33. So he would have been around during the time of Emperor Augustus, plus probably a little bit of Tiberius, if you're looking for a comparison in terms of time. Blind History is brought to you by Taylor Blinds and Shutters. All the episodes are available on the cliffcentral.com website and app, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. During the medieval era, relics were a huge cottage industry. I mean, you could buy, one of the nails that was put through the hand of Jesus. You could buy the crown of thorns. And in many Catholic churches all over Europe, they still have and venerate these objects.
And our whole business has come out of that. I mean, the amount of pieces of the cross that have been found would have been able to build a ship, So there's always people looking for opportunity.